You're just a freeloader pretending this house is yours. Vanessa's shrill voice carried from the foyer as she dragged her designer suitcase toward the front door. Maybe when we get back, you'll have finally found your own place. My father nodded in agreement, not bothering to look me in the eye. We've been more than generous letting you stay here rent-free. Most parents would have kicked their adult children out by now. I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, my morning coffee cooling in my trembling hands. This is my house, I said quietly. Mom left it to me. You know that. Vanessa rolled her eyes dramatically. Here we go again with that fantasy. Tell her, Frank. My father's jaw tightened. Your mother wanted us all to live here as a family, not for you to lord it over us like some princess. Legally, I'm still... Legally what, Dad? I challenged, my voice stronger than I felt. He grabbed the handle of his suitcase. We're going to miss our flight. Cassie's already waiting in the car. The door slammed behind them, leaving me alone in the echoing silence of the Victorian home my mother had lovingly restored before cancer took her 5 years ago. My name is Samara Wells, I'm 24 years old, and despite what my father and stepmother believe, I am the legal owner of this house in suburban Philadelphia. My mother made sure of that, placing the property in a trust with me as the beneficiary following her death. What I want is simple: respect for my mother's wishes and acknowledgement of my rightful ownership. Standing in my way are my father, who has conveniently forgotten the trust's terms, and Vanessa, my stepmother of 3 years, who treats me like an unwanted houseguest. I took a deep breath and walked to the large bay window, watching their car back down the driveway. My stepsister Cassie, 16, sat in the back seat, her face illuminated by her phone screen. They were headed to the Bahamas for 10 days, a family vacation from which I had been deliberately excluded. As their car disappeared around the corner, I felt a familiar mixture of hurt and anger rising in my chest. I had tolerated their dismissive behavior for years, telling myself it was what Mom would have wanted, for us to remain a family despite her absence. A notification pinged on my phone, an email from Vanessa to my father, accidentally copied to my address. Frank, I've spoken with Harold. He says once we're back from vacation, we can move forward with having Samara legally removed from the house. He thinks her claim about Caroline's wishes won't hold up without the original trust documents. My stomach dropped. Who was Harold? And what did Vanessa mean about the original trust documents? With growing unease, I realized the situation was far worse than I had imagined. My mother, Caroline Wells, was a brilliant architectural historian who spent her career restoring historic homes in Philadelphia. This house, a Queen Anne Victorian built in 1887, had been her crowning achievement and greatest love. She purchased it as a crumbling foreclosure when I was just 7 years old, pouring her heart and savings into its restoration. My childhood memories are filled with the sounds of sanders and hammers, the smell of varnish and paint, and my mother's infectious excitement about uncovering original fixtures and woodwork. Dad never shared her passion. An accountant by trade, he tolerated what he called Caroline's expensive hobby, but complained constantly about the costs and disruption. Their marriage had been strained for years before Mom's diagnosis, but they stayed together, largely for my sake. When Mom learned her cancer was terminal, she made careful arrangements for the future. I was 19 then, a sophomore in college studying architectural preservation, following in her footsteps. Between chemotherapy sessions, she consulted with attorneys, set up the trust, and had long conversations with me about her wishes for the house. "This will be yours one day," she'd told me, her thin hand tracing the intricate balusters of the main staircase. "Your father can live here as long as he needs to, but the house belongs to you. Promise me you'll preserve it." I promised, of course. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly Dad would move on after her death. He met Vanessa at a work function barely a year after Mom's funeral. 6 months later, she and Cassie had moved into our home, bringing with them modern furniture that clashed with the Victorian aesthetic and an attitude that suggested they were doing me a favor by occupying my father's house. Initially, I tried to accommodate them. I was still finishing college, Still grieving and grateful for any semblance of family, Vanessa made occasional efforts at friendliness, though these moments always felt performative rather than genuine. Cassie remained distant, buried in her phone or sequestered in her room. Dad changed after they arrived. He began referring to Mom's carefully curated antiques as that old junk, and suggesting we modernize rooms that had been historically restored. When I objected, citing Mom's wishes, he would grow distant and cold. "Your mother is gone, Samara," he'd say. "The living need to come first now." I had graduated last year and found a job with a local preservation society, allowing me to stay in Philadelphia. I could have moved out, found my own apartment. Sometimes I asked myself why I stayed in a home where I was increasingly made to feel unwelcome. The answer was simple. This house was Mom's legacy to me, her final gift. Walking away felt like betraying her memory. So I endured the subtle digs, the exclusion, the gradual erosion of my place in what should have been my home. Now staring at Vanessa's accidentally forwarded email, I wondered if my patience had been a mistake. With my father and Vanessa now thousands of miles away, I decided to use their absence to search for answers. Who was Harold, and what did Vanessa mean about the trust documents? I started in my father's home office, a room that had once been my mother's library. The transformation was symbolic of the larger changes in our house. Her warm, book-lined retreat now a sterile workspace dominated by Vanessa's organizational system. I hesitated at the door, feeling like an intruder despite being the property's rightful owner. The desk drawers yielded nothing unusual. Office supplies, bills, a few family photos with me conspicuously absent. I turned my attention to the filing cabinet, methodically working through folders labeled with Vanessa's precise handwriting. In the back of the bottom drawer, I found a thick manila envelope labeled Wells House, Legal. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it, spreading the contents across the desk. Inside were copies of documents I recognized, the trust agreement my mother had established, naming me as beneficiary, and my father as a lifetime tenant with specific conditions. But there were also newer papers I'd never seen, correspondence with someone named Harold Brennan, a real estate attorney, discussing strategies to invalidate the outdated trust and establish clear ownership. A yellow sticky note in my father's handwriting read, "Original trust documents in Caroline's old lockbox? Sam might have key." Cold understanding washed over me. They were looking for the original trust documents, likely to destroy them. Without those papers, it would be my word against my father's about Mom's intentions. As I continued reading, the depth of the betrayal became clear. My father had been consulting with this attorney for months, seeking ways to claim the house outright. Vanessa was actively involved, suggesting they could argue that Mom had been mentally compromised when she established the trust due to her medication. The most recent letter from Harold outlined their strongest case, claiming that I had violated the trust conditions by interfering with Frank's quiet enjoyment of the property. A bizarre inversion of reality that made me the antagonist in my own home. I sat back, papers scattered around me, a strange numbness replacing my initial shock. My father wasn't just forgetting my ownership, he was actively plotting to take my inheritance, to erase my mother's final wishes. Almost mechanically, I gathered the documents and returned to my room. From the back of my closet, I retrieved a small fireproof box, my mother's final gift to me. Inside was the original trust agreement, exactly where she told me to keep it, along with a sealed envelope I'd never opened, marked in case of disputes. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter in my mother's handwriting and a business card for Eliza Montgomery, Trust Administrator. "My darling Samara, if you're reading this, then Frank has forgotten his promises to me. I hoped he would honor my wishes, but I've prepared for the possibility that he might not. Eliza has the power to enforce the trust terms if necessary. The house is yours, sweet girl. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. All my love, Mom." I ran my fingers over her familiar handwriting, tears blurring my vision. Even from beyond the grave, she was protecting me, anticipating threats I couldn't have imagined coming from my own father. I should have been relieved to have this safeguard, but instead, I felt a profound sense of loss. Whatever remaining illusions I had about my father's character had been shattered completely. The parent I thought I knew, flawed but ultimately caring, was a fiction. Though I now had the means to protect my inheritance, I wasn't yet ready to use it. I needed time to process this betrayal, to decide how to move forward without destroying what little family I had left. I carefully returned everything to its hiding place, my mind racing with questions. How long had Dad been planning this? Was his relationship with Vanessa somehow connected to his designs on the house? And most painfully, had he ever truly accepted Mom's wishes, or had he been biding his time from the beginning? The next morning, I called the number on Eliza Montgomery's business card. After explaining who I was, I heard a warm, professional voice respond, "I've been wondering when I might hear from you, Samara." We arranged to meet that afternoon at her downtown office. Eliza turned out to be a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, with silver hair and piercing eyes that reminded me of my mother's. Caroline was very thorough in establishing this trust, she explained, reviewing the documents I'd brought. The conditions of your father's tenancy are quite specific. He may reside in the home rent-free for his lifetime, provided he acknowledges your ownership and doesn't interfere with your rights as beneficiary. He's been doing the opposite, I said, sharing the evidence I'd found. He's actively trying to invalidate the trust. Eliza's expression darkened. That would constitute a serious breach of the trust conditions. She studied the papers from my father's office. This attorney Brennan is taking an aggressive approach. Have there been other issues besides denying your ownership? I hesitated, then described the increasing hostility, the systematic exclusion, and the most recent incident before their vacation. I see, she made careful notes. Verbal abuse and creating an inhospitable environment for the beneficiary would also violate the terms. Your mother anticipated potential conflicts and built-in protections. What kind of protections? As trust administrator, I have the authority to enforce the conditions, up to and including terminating your father's right to occupy the property if he's in substantial breach. A mixture of relief and anxiety washed over me. Here was the solution, but at what cost? Evicting my own father seemed extreme, potentially destroying any chance of reconciliation. I don't necessarily want to kick him out, I admitted. I just want him to respect Mom's wishes and treat me with basic decency. Eliza nodded sympathetically. Let's start with a formal letter reminding him of the trust terms. Sometimes a legal reality check is enough to correct behavior. This approach seemed reasonable, firm, but not nuclear. Eliza drafted the letter while I waited, outlining my father's obligations under the trust and requesting a meeting upon his return to discuss ongoing compliance. This should be waiting for him when he gets back, she said, handing me the envelope. In the meantime, document any further communications or incidents. If he escalates rather than complies, we'll need evidence to take stronger action. I left feeling cautiously optimistic. The letter would serve as a wake-up call without permanently damaging our relationship. Perhaps once my father understood that his plans with Harold Brennan wouldn't succeed, he'd accept reality and we could rebuild some semblance of family harmony. That evening, my phone chimed with a text from Vanessa. "We need to talk about your behavior while we're gone. Frank is very upset. Expect changes when we return." Attached was a photo of my father's office, the desk drawers partially open, papers not quite as I'd left them. They must have installed cameras before leaving, something I should have anticipated. My intrusion had been discovered. Shortly after, an email arrived from my father. "I'm deeply disappointed in your breach of privacy. Searching through my personal documents shows exactly why you're not responsible enough for home ownership. We'll be consulting with our attorney immediately upon our return." I forwarded both messages to Eliza, my hands shaking. Her response was immediate. "This changes our approach. Their aggressive stance suggests they won't respond reasonably to the letter. I recommend you allow me to exercise the trust's enforcement provisions now." In plain language, she was suggesting I authorize the eviction process. the nuclear option I'd hoped to avoid. Before I could reply, another email arrived, from Harold Brennan directly. Ms. Wells, I've been retained by Frank and Vanessa Wells regarding the disputed property at 1847 Chestnut Avenue. Please cease any communication with my clients and direct all future correspondence to my office. Be advised that we are preparing legal action regarding your unfounded claims to the property. My heart sank as I realized my cautious, measured approach had backfired. By giving them warning, I'd only accelerated their plans. The hope I'd felt earlier evaporated, replaced by the sickening certainty that this conflict was heading toward an irreparable break. "Mom," I whispered to the empty room, "what would you have me do now?" The next morning, I called Eliza to discuss our options. Her advice was clear and firm. "Samara, your father has engaged legal counsel who's already taking an aggressive stance. This suggests they intend to move quickly once they return. We need to respond with equal decisiveness." "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "I recommend we petition the court for an emergency enforcement of the trust provisions, including a restraining order preventing your father and his wife from re-entering the property pending a full hearing." "A restraining order? Isn't that extreme?" "Not in this context. Their communications show clear intent to violate the trust and potentially remove you from your rightful home. The restraining order would simply maintain the status quo until a judge can review the full facts." I paced my bedroom, weighing her words. "They're on vacation for 8 more days. Do we really need to act so quickly?" "The timing works to our advantage," Eliza explained. "Filing now gives us time to secure the order before they return, preventing a potentially volatile confrontation. Remember, they don't know you've contacted me or that you have the original trust documents." Her logic was sound, but the emotional weight of the decision felt crushing. This wasn't just about property rights. It was about severing what remained of my family. "Let me think about it," I said finally. After hanging up, I wandered through the silent house, running my fingers along the walnut banister my mother had lovingly restored, examining the stained glass window she'd commissioned to replace a broken original. Every corner held her memory, her vision of what this home should be. My contemplation was interrupted by another notification, a banking alert I'd set up after discovering their plans. To my shock, my father had remotely initiated a wire transfer from our shared household account, the account I primarily funded for utilities and upkeep, to Harold Brennan's law firm. He was using my own money to finance his legal attack against me. This final betrayal crystallized my decision. I called Eliza back immediately. "I'm ready to proceed," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "What do you need from me?" The next few days passed in a blur of legal activity. Eliza filed the emergency petition, gathered affidavits, and compiled evidence of my father's actions. My role was to document the home's condition, catalog my mother's restorations, and prepare a statement about the trust's creation. 3 days before my father and Vanessa were due to return, Eliza called with unexpected news. "The judge has granted our petition," she said, "but there's a complication. In reviewing your mother's original will and trust documents, we discovered something significant." "What kind of something?" "Your mother added a provision we weren't aware of. If your father remarried, the trust required him to either purchase your half of the property at market value or relocate within 1 year." I sat down, stunned. "He was supposed to buy me out after marrying Vanessa?" "Yes. The provision was triggered 3 years ago when he married Vanessa, but it appears he never disclosed this to the trust. Caroline wanted to ensure you wouldn't be forced to live with a stepmother who might not respect your position." The implications hit me all at once. So not only was he violating the terms by denying my ownership, but he's been in breach of the trust for 2 years by not buying me out or moving? Exactly. And there's more. Caroline left a sealed letter with my office to be opened if this specific provision was violated. My heart raced. "What does it say?" "I think you should read it yourself," Eliza said. "Can you come to my office this afternoon?" Hours later, I sat in Eliza's office, my mother's letter trembling in my hands. The familiar handwriting blurred through my tears as I read her final message to me. My dearest Samara, if you're reading this, Frank has remarried and chosen to remain in our home without honoring the trust's terms. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I've always known his attachment to the house was more about possession than appreciation. What Frank doesn't know, what I never told anyone, is that the funds for purchasing and restoring our home didn't come from my salary alone. They came primarily from my inheritance from my grandmother, with the specific condition that the property remain with blood descendants. Frank has no legal claim to the house beyond what I granted him in the trust, which he has now violated. I've instructed Eliza to help you claim what is fully and rightfully yours. The house is your legacy, your heritage, not just from me, but from generations of women in our family. Stand firm, my brave girl. You are stronger than you know. All my love, Mom. I looked up at Eliza, who had been quietly waiting while I absorbed this revelation. This changes everything, doesn't it? She nodded. Your father has no claim whatsoever on the property. None. Armed with this new information, Eliza and I revised our legal strategy. Rather than simply enforcing the trust conditions, we would pursue complete termination of my father's tenancy rights based on multiple breaches, denying my ownership, creating a hostile environment, attempting to invalidate the trust, failing to comply with the remarriage provision, and misusing household funds. The restraining order is now in place, Eliza explained as we finalized the paperwork. They won't be able to enter the property when they return. The sheriff will serve the formal eviction notice and will proceed with a court hearing for permanent resolution. I nodded, feeling oddly calm despite the enormity of what we were setting in motion. What kind of timeline are we looking at? The temporary order lasts 30 days. The hearing for permanent resolution is scheduled for the 3rd week, which gives your father time to secure new housing arrangements. As I drove home, I contemplated the practical aspects of this abrupt transition. Most of the furniture was my mother's, documented in the trust inventory, but my father and Vanessa had added their own pieces. Cassie had her own bedroom filled with personal belongings. I would need to make arrangements for them to collect their possessions under supervision. The unfairness of disrupting Cassie's life weighed on me. Despite our distant relationship, she was an innocent bystander in the adults' conflict. I decided to pack her things myself, carefully and respectfully, to minimize her distress. 2 days before their scheduled return, I received an unexpected call from a Philadelphia number I didn't recognize. Is this Samara Wells? A young female voice asked. Yes, who's calling? It's Cassie. Her voice sounded strained. I need to talk to you about something important. Surprised, I asked, Aren't you still in the Bahamas with your mom and my dad? I am, but I'm calling from the hotel phone. I don't want them to know. She paused. I heard them talking last night. They were fighting about the house and about you. My stomach tightened. What did they say? Frank said their lawyer thinks they can get the house if they claim you're mentally unstable or something. Mom suggested they could make it look like you're dangerous to be around. Cassie's voice dropped lower. They talked about planting something in your room when we get back. I don't know what exactly, but it sounded bad. The revelation stunned me. They were planning to fabricate evidence against me, potentially something to suggest I was dangerous or unbalanced. It was a desperate, despicable tactic. Thank you for telling me, Cassie. That was brave of you. It didn't seem right, and I heard other stuff too. About how the house is actually yours, not Frank's. Is that true? Yes, I said simply. My mother left it to me. There was a long silence. They never told me that. Mom always said it was Frank's house and you were just living there until you got your life together. Another pause. I'm sorry for how they've treated you. Her unexpected empathy brought tears to my eyes. It's not your fault, Cassie. I should go before they notice I'm gone, but I wanted you to know. After the call ended, I immediately contacted Eliza to relay this new information. This changes things, she said grimly. If they're planning to fabricate evidence, we need to take additional precautions. I'll contact the court about modifying the restraining order to prevent them from entering the property under any circumstances, even to collect belongings. We'll arrange for a court-appointed supervisor for that process. I agreed with her assessment, but a new worry had emerged. What about Cassie? She's just 16. She shouldn't be caught in the middle of this. We can request special provisions for her in the court order, Eliza suggested. Perhaps supervised visits or a neutral exchange location for her possessions. As we discussed these modifications, another call came in, this time from my father directly. Against my better judgment, I answered. Samara, he began, his voice falsely warm. We've been thinking about our conversation before we left. Vanessa and I want to apologize for our harsh words. We'd like to have a family meeting when we get back to discuss everyone's needs fairly. The sudden change in tone confirmed Cassie's warning. They were setting me up, trying to get me to lower my guard before their return. That sounds reasonable, I replied, matching his artificial warmth. We definitely have a lot to discuss. As soon as the call ended, I turned to Eliza. They're planning something specific for when they return. We need to be ready. She nodded grimly. Don't worry. We will be. The day of my father and Vanessa's return dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the storm about to break over our family. As instructed by Eliza, I had vacated the house temporarily, watching from across the street as the necessary parties assembled on the front lawn. The sheriff's deputy, Eliza, in her role as trust administrator, and a court representative to document the proceedings. Their taxi pulled up at precisely 2:15 p.m. I watched my father emerge first, his face relaxed from vacation until he spotted the official vehicles. Vanessa followed, designer sunglasses hiding her initial reaction. Cassie hung back slightly, catching my eye across the distance with a small, almost imperceptible nod. From my position, I couldn't hear the exact words exchanged, but the body language told the story clearly enough. The sheriff stepped forward, officially serving them with the court order. My father's posture stiffened in shock, his hand reaching for the documents. Vanessa ripped off her sunglasses, gesturing wildly as she presumably protested. Eliza remained calm, pointing occasionally to specific sections of the paperwork. The court representative took notes and photographs, maintaining an official record of the proceedings. As the reality of their situation became clear, my father's face transformed, first purpling with rage, then draining to ashen disbelief. Vanessa's reaction was more volatile, her arms flailing as she shouted at the officials, then turning accusingly toward my father. I had imagined this moment differently, perhaps with satisfaction or vindication. Instead, I felt a complex mixture of sadness and resolution. This wasn't a victory to celebrate, but a necessary ending to enable a new beginning. The final blow came when Eliza handed them the last document, my mother's letter explaining the true origin of the house funds and the generations-long female inheritance that preceded me. My father sank onto one of the suitcases, the facade of righteous indignation crumbling into stunned defeat as he finally understood the depth of his miscalculation. The house had never been his to claim. It had always, unequivocally, been mine. In the weeks following that decisive confrontation, the practical matters of separation proceeded with formal precision. My father and Vanessa secured an apartment across town, collecting their personal belongings under court supervision. Our communication was limited to terse emails regarding logistics, the warmth of family irreparably damaged by betrayal and legal intervention. The most surprising development came from Cassie. 2 days after the eviction, she contacted me requesting to meet at a local cafe. They've been fighting constantly, she confided over hot chocolate. Mom blames Frank for not telling her the truth about the house. Frank blames her for pushing him to take legal action. She hesitated. I was wondering if I could visit sometimes. The house, it feels more like home than anywhere we've lived. Her request touched me unexpectedly. Of course you can, Cassie. Anytime. She became a regular visitor, initially for weekend afternoons, eventually staying overnight in her old room when tensions at the apartment became unbearable. Despite our differences, we formed a tentative bond. Two people collateral damage in the chaos of our parents' choices. My father attempted reconciliation once, arriving unannounced on a Sunday morning. "I never meant for things to go this far," he offered awkwardly. "After your mother died, I just couldn't accept that she hadn't trusted me with the house." "It wasn't about trust, Dad," I replied. "It was about legacy. Mom wanted to ensure the house remained in the family for generations." He nodded slowly. "I understand that now. Too late, I suppose. Perhaps someday we would rebuild some version of relationship, but for now, the wounds were too fresh, the betrayal too profound." As for the house, I threw myself into continuing my mother's preservation work, focusing on the third-floor renovation she had planned but never completed. Each restored molding and carefully chosen fixture honored her vision and strengthened my connection to the women who came before me. "The house has always known who it belonged to," Eliza remarked during a visit. "Your mother would be proud of how you've protected her legacy." She was right. This wasn't just about ownership. It was about honoring the past while building my future, exactly as my mother had intended.